Welcome to the Innovators and Investors Podcast. I'm Kristian Marquez, founder and CEO of FinStrat Management. At FinStrat, we provide CFO-led accounting, finance, and reporting services to assist clients monetize their business. Stick around to the end of the podcast and I'll share how you can be our next guest. Now on to the show. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Innovators and Investors Podcast. I'm your host, Kristian Marquez, founder and CEO of FinStrat Management. Super excited because today we have with us Greg Davis, founder and CEO of Overwatch Imaging. Greg, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Kristian. Great to talk with you.
Oh, well, excited to have you. And to start, would love to hear and learn a little bit more about Overwatch Imaging.
Sure. So Overwatch Imaging is a venture-backed intelligence technology company that is working in the dual-use space. So we have civil and commercial clients, we have defense and intelligence clients, and we work primarily on automation of airborne imagery intelligence, geospatial intelligence used to allow the teams that need to respond to critical situations, whether that's wildfires or search and rescue situations or infrastructure inspections or defense applications, to find what they're looking for faster, to know more about their environments more automatically so they can spend more time responding to intelligence rather than searching for a needle in a haystack.
And so would love to hear, what was the inspiration that led up to you founding the company?
Yeah, so I founded Overwatch in 2016. So we've been at this for a long time, and I've spent most of my career, all of my career really, in overhead intelligence, imagery intelligence. Around 2016, I was seeing major shifts in how the world was thinking about drones and how the world was thinking about intelligence and data. And so at that time, we were starting to see the rise of NVIDIA, the rise of really incredible edge compute technologies. We're beginning to see the rise of artificial intelligence applied to image data and things like ImageNet. We're starting to get to the point where many people could take them seriously. The outputs of those systems was really starting to become comparable with human level performance at image interpretation. And then we saw an opening in the drone ecosystem. So my background is in UAVs, uncrewed aerial vehicles, and saw that uncrewed aerial vehicles were transitioning from a decade or more working primarily in America's wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And now we're starting to think about what comes next. So that meant much greater focus on civil and commercial applications. It also meant much greater focus on, in the defense sphere, applications in the Pacific. And so all these changing trends led me to think that we needed to build a new kind of company that was more focused on dealing with data rather than simply collecting data. We saw that there were a lot of ways of collecting data that existed in the world at that time, but the customers were already then, 9 years ago, saying they were getting overwhelmed with how much data they had. We've only seen that get worse over the years. There's just so much data available. And so what Overwatch focuses on is not just that collecting of data, but doing something with it to turn a data collection mechanism into actionable information.
And so I think I inferred that one of the historical limitations of having the status is interpretation. If that's fair, are there any other limitations that Overwatch is solving for?
Yeah, there's consistently an issue that's raised by both civil and commercial end-use agencies, as well as defense and intelligence agencies, that we need to get more done with less. We want to become more efficient at our operations. We want to reduce the crew that's assigned to any given operation to keep finding efficiencies in our work. That may be motivated by economic incentives, that may be motivated by safety, it may be motivated by just simply recruiting challenges. But this idea of needing to get more done with less is a really strong theme that we hear from all the clients we work with. But then at the same time, we see this issue that clients are increasingly trying to find small things. The needle in the haystack is becoming more and more important. You might think about it in the context of wildfires, that one small lightning strike can create a massive wildfire. And so our ability to find those small spot fires faster is increasingly important. Or you could think about that in the defense ecosystem, where you see the rise of small uncrewed surface vessels creating a threat to Navy ships. So this changing world has led to just physically smaller objects creating more of a need for a real-time response. And so the ideas of timely data and the ideas of getting more done with less, more interpretation done with less resource, are driving themes that we always come back to when we're thinking about our product roadmap, when we're talking to clients about how we add value to their operations.
And so with that, Overwatch is a bit unique in the early stage ecosystem in so much as it's not only software, but hardware as well. What's your philosophy on the degree that you and your team get involved with designing and ensuring that your hardware meets your specifications?
Yeah, it's a great important part of the challenge. It's really what makes us valuable is that we are able to work on both sides of that equation. It's of course tricky running a hardware business and a software business at the same time, but we accept that complexity because that's the way our users and our customers think about the world. Generally, our market is used to buying hardware systems. Now, those can be software-enabled hardware, but that's where the market is. And so it's important to us that we meet the market where it is. And while it's nice to have discussions with investors about the dreamy financials of pure SaaS businesses, that's simply not where the market is. And for good reason. There is this in the defense ecosystem. There are real reasons one needs to project power, and that's done largely with hardware. So again, software-enabled hardware, but at some point, the idea of software only needs to be installed on something in order to interact into the physical world. We do a lot of our operations in areas that are disconnected from unlimited or simple communications. So we're frequently operating in areas where there's no communications, which is weird. We're used to an ecosystem where I'm at my desk at work and I have perfect information data flow. On my drive home on my phone, I still have perfect information data flow. And once I get home, I have that access. But when we're working in a search and rescue environment, when we're working off a Navy ship, there frequently isn't perfect access to data transmission. And so we need to understand the hardware implications of where's that software going to live? What are we going to physically do with the data when we collect it? Because we can't always just push everything to the cloud or store it on additional servers. Sometimes we don't have those available to us. It's created a really interesting business model, though, where we are working to bring a software business model to a client community that is used to buying hardware. And so that leads to really interesting discussions where we're talking about things that in our personal lives and in our kind of enterprise business lives, we've been doing without thinking much about it for decades already, signing up to recurring license agreements, things along those lines, recurring revenue products in the both kind of government sales, in the infrastructure market, in the defense market. That idea of recurring software delivery and recurring software revenue is pretty novel still, especially for sort of software-enabled hardware and edge software. So that's been interesting, having early discussions with buyers who haven't really thought through and haven't become comfortable with that idea yet, and having to explain these concepts that in a lot of the tech industry or consumer world are fully bought into. That we will continue delivering increasing value over time with increasing software performance. It's a funny experience having to talk through that. That's a good value. Everybody wins in that equation. So yeah, we've had a great, interesting, eye-opening, challenging experience being a hardware plus software company.
And I know there are a lot of founders too in the audience who would just love to hear your perspective on, as the business evolved and you realized that you were going to drive the most value with a combination of both hardware and software, what were some of the most difficult lessons you had to learn along the way?
Yeah, a couple different ways of tackling that. Of course, it's pretty tricky in the kind of founder mode startup ecosystem where you're creating a product and creating a market and creating a go-to-market function all at the same time. It's really difficult to do things like inventory planning. So we at any time have as much inventory on hand as we have cash on hand. And that's a really tricky situation. We have inventory that has 6 month or even 9 month lead times, but frequently we don't know who our clients are going to be 6 or 12 months out. Inventory planning is really tricky from the hardware perspective in this startup environment where there's just so many moving pieces. On the other hand, I learned this lesson that the investor community really highly values software business models and software revenue. And so we've been working hard to be responsive to that, to understand where that interest comes from, understand why that kind of business model is so powerful, and to make the most of both kind of business models or both sets of opportunities. So we do have a software only line of business that puts our software onto third-party hardware. There's some really nice aspects that come with that model, and that we can benefit from the scale that other hardware companies have already achieved. So that was a really interesting breakthrough. But also there's no substitute for expertise. And so when we make our own hardware plus software systems, we really know everything about how those systems work. We can optimize all the trade-offs throughout the systems. And so there's some really powerful benefits that come from doing it that way, even if the investor community writes off some of that revenue as potentially not that exciting. So we say that's where the market is, and that's where we can make the best product. It's been interesting. It's been full of a lot of kind of back and forth and trying to understand what our best path is, and a lot of experimenting with different models. So we've sold our core technology probably in 10 different ways, 10 different sales and business models at this point, as we try to iterate through different ideas on what's the best model for us, and where can we bring value to customers, and where are customers ready and willing to buy.
And so I hear this theme of being flexible and being prepared to iterate based on what you learn and what the market is looking for. How has that impacted how you think about your team and making sure that they're in a position to support an evolving landscape?
Yeah. There's a ton of inspiring quotes out in the internet sphere about the challenge of hard work and working through adversity and all that. And all those things definitely ring true for life at the startup. So when we recruit new employees, we ask early and often in the recruiting and interviewing process, how do you feel about a dynamic startup environment where frequently there is no process for what we're trying to do? And even more frequently, if there is a process, we're trying to evolve it to the change of conditions that we are learning about and we're creating. We need our employees to buy into that flexibility. And I think by and large, the employees that are here working with us, the employees that thrive in this environment, love that trade-off of increased flexibility or chaos. But what comes with that is increased agency and increased ability to make an impact. A lot of my employees at every level on our team provide me this feedback that they love the ability that they can get something done. They see an opportunity, they can go make it happen and get it done. Whether that's changes to our benefits program, or changes to the way we complete our production testing, or the product roadmap for 2 years out. That's something where any employee with very little friction can change the course of what we're doing. And so that's a great trade-off, but it definitely does come with this constant environment of change. And so, yeah, we have to just be open. That's the environment that our employees are hiring into. We reinforce that regularly with things like monthly team awards, where we celebrate employees who do support. Leading with a bias for action is one of the areas that we celebrate our team in every month. We have to continuously celebrate this idea that we are all in this to try to build something new that's going to make a massive impact. But for us to build something new that makes a massive impact, that means we're frequently going to be working in a space that is not figured out yet. And so that comes with a lot of stress, that comes with a lot of pressure. that comes with a lot of chaos, but it's pretty fun.
Yeah, you answered my next question. That was going to be how you think about nurturing culture. But it sounds like you're on a great path, celebrating wins, and when things go great, I think is brilliant. And I've had a similar experience where you get a lot of people, great people, who enjoy the flexibility of early stage companies, but when you can get together and call out people for doing A+ efforts, it's really wise, and I find it benefits everybody.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's a great mechanism for us to shape our culture to what we want, what we decide as a team that we want that culture to be. It's a great way of warding off the challenges of just inertia and like settling into a routine. We can continuously reinforce this idea that we are building. We are here to build something new. Uh, one element that's been important to our business is we have been operationally supporting customers in real world applications almost since our founding day. So we were shipping product just a few months after we started the company, and we continue to have full rate operations going. They're real relevant users, real relevant missions. And that's something that our team just loves. That's something that we all can fall back to is we do have big aspirations about additional markets and additional products. But on any given day, the products that we've made here, and we can be pretty specific about that. The wire connections that any given employee we can point to and say, hey, the work you did there, the software that you wrote and tested there, that flight test you completed, that product is now in this user's hands, doing real work, adding real value to the world. And I think our team loves that and rallies around that. I certainly embrace that as part of our startup journey is, yes, I would love to kind of just work on the future, but being out there and relevant today is how we learn what really works versus what sounds like it's going to work in PowerPoint, but doesn't actually meet the need. So we're able to learn about that. We're able to collect great data, and that builds and reinforces the team culture.
Yeah, being able to identify tangible wins and value is so empowering. 100% agreed. And it's also creates a great feedback loop too, because now someone has validation that what they're working on or their focus is actually making a difference. And then in the times, of course, when it doesn't, they can pivot.
Yeah, and that's tough. That means shipping early stage product. It means supporting early stage product. And that brings lots of feedback, some good and some more painful to hear. There's the sort of joke in the startup world that if you're not embarrassed with your first product release, then you waited too long to release it. And there's definitely some truth to that as well. But that drives the speed at which we work. We're able to learn quickly from mistakes. We're able to learn quickly from wins. And again, focus really on what the actual product needs to be and what the actual problem is rather than what we might have thought it was. Yeah, it's a really important part is having that user engagement, that user feedback. It supports the learning, it supports the team culture, it supports the business model.
We're unfortunately getting near the end of our time, but before we wrap up, for benefit of our audience, we're recording this here towards end of November 2024. We just completed presidential elections. Arguably, there are a number of conflicts taking place around the world. There seem to be no shortage of natural disasters. You're in a very unique position to share with our audience your perspective on what you think this new administration brings and what impact that's going to have on geospatial intelligence.
Yeah, sure. I think there are a couple things that are important. So what I shared with my team as we were going through election week recently is that it's important to win, and we need to focus on that as a team. That while we might like working on perfecting some of our technology or refining some of our processes or making our work easier, the main thing that we need to measure ourselves on first and foremost is winning. And so I think that was one of the themes throughout this election cycle, was that whether you agree or disagree with certain policies, the idea of winning has to be part of that equation. We talk about that as a team. In terms of impacts on geospatial intelligence, I think intelligence is always valuable, right? So the more we know, that provides decision makers with options, right? So I'm excited regardless of who those decision makers are and ultimately what some of those response decisions are. We are in a good spot because we are informing those decision makers earlier, faster, more efficiently, more safely with the information they need to make good decisions. I value that intelligence, that awareness. I value that expertise. And so those are my wishes for public policy and our elected officials. I think the way I can best contribute to that, and what we talk about here as a team, the way we can all best contribute to that is by doing a great job of providing great information in a timely way so that people can make the best decisions with the best information.
Yeah, and it makes total sense. I think it would be difficult to argue that the market is going to cease putting a premium on speed and efficacy when it comes to information.
Yeah, and we certainly would love to see less conflict in the world and less disasters in the world, but also those conflicts and disasters do seem to be increasing, and I feel like we're making an impact with our work by supporting better response to those things.
Love it. Greg, been a great podcast. Thank you. If there's anyone who's interested in potentially becoming a member of the Overwatch team or investor who'd like to learn more about the company, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, we post images very frequently on our LinkedIn account. So Overwatch Imaging, give us a follow on LinkedIn. You can apply for positions through our website. We would love to follow up. We would love to share more about what we're doing because we are making a market. We are building a new business model, and that's all pretty exciting work. So we'd love to share more about it.
Fantastic. Greg Davis, founder and CEO of Overwatch Imaging. Greg, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, Kristian, thank you. Appreciate this opportunity. This has been great.
Kristian Marquez here. Thank you so much for listening to the Innovators and Investors Podcast. If you are a successful founder or an investor who would like to be on the podcast, please visit podcast.finstratmgmt.com/podcast-guest. If you've got something out of this interview, please share this episode on social media. If you know someone that would be a great guest, please tag them on social media to let them know about the show and include the hashtag Innovators and Investors. I'd love to see your posts and suggestions. We're regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you catch each new episode, please subscribe to the Innovators and Investors Podcast. And your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show, and it means a lot to me and my team. Would you like to know more? Go to our website, FinStratMGMT.com, or follow us on LinkedIn or on X. Our handle is @FinStratMGMT. This is Kristian Marquez. Thank you for listening. Until next time.